Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. He humiliated and slapped her, without knowing that she was the wife of the Army Chief General. One autumn morning in the small town of Redford, Texas, a light wind stirred the russet leaves along the sidewalk still damp with dew. Cafe Man, a modest but welcoming establishment, opened its doors to the smell of toasted bread, freshly ground coffee, and the morning murmurs of a few regulars who came to read the newspaper. At 8:12, the bell above the door jingled softly. A woman entered, walking with measured, almost floating steps. She wore a simple ivory white blouse, carefully ironed, a raw denim, and a fitted khaki jacket which suggested an athletic silhouette. His dark brown hair were gathered in a low bun, and she wore no jewelry except a fine golden wedding ring, discreet. Her gaze quickly scanned the room. Calm, alert, without arrogance. She spotted a table in a corner, near the large bay window, and headed towards it. A waitress gave her a polite smile. Nothing in the attitude of Angela Bennett did not let her true identity be guessed. She had not come in a limousine, nor escorted. She had come in civilian clothes, alone, for a private meeting that she had not confided to anyone other than her husband. For Angela was no ordinary woman. She was the wife of the General Marcus Bennett, one of the most powerful and respected men in the U.S. military. And yet, that morning, in that provincial cafe, she had chosen to simply be herself. A woman. A citizen. A quiet presence in a busy world. After a few minutes of staring at the menu on the wall, she stood up to order. That's when everything changed. Just before she reached the counter, a man appears on his right, looking hurried, with a heavy step. He hit violently with the shoulder, without slowing down, without apologizing. Back off, woman. First the men, then the others. The physical shock was harsh, but the verbal shock was even more brutal. Angela, stunned at first, took a second to understand. She turned slowly, staring at the man. He was a man in his 50s, with a ruddy complexion, belly overflowing from a wrinkled shirt, partially tucked into worn trousers. He wore a belt with a private security badge and poorly polished military boots. His face betrayed the easy anger, the accumulated frustration, and the ordinary contempt of those who always feel above. Angela took a deep breath, and replied calmly. Sir, I think I was the first one here. I don't want any conflict, just a coffee. The man, Ronald Weaver, looked her down. His eyes didn't see a dignified, intelligent woman, or even a conversation partner. He saw an easy target. A black woman. Alone. You've got guts talking to me like that. And without warning, in an impulsive gesture of unprecedented violence, he raised his hand and slapped her. The dry snap, the slap of her palm against Angela's cheek, made the entire cafe jump. The customers froze. An elderly woman dropped her spoon. A young couple interrupted her conversation. The waitress took a step back, her hands shaking. Angela swayed slightly. Her cheek turned red instantly, but she didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't scream. She looked up at Ronald, and in that gaze was an icy pride, a silent storm. You're going to learn to respect real men, you arrogant bitch, he growled, walking away towards the line. She didn't answer. She turned around, his gait still straight despite the pain, and left the cafe in a tense, almost religious silence. The outside world seemed suddenly louder, contrasting with the stupor inside. A young waiter named Orr, visibly moved, ran up behind her. He stopped her timidly, his hands clasped. Madam. I'm so sorry. He has no right to treat you like that. I didn't know what to do. Angela looked at him, and a thin smile played on her lips despite the blush on her cheek. It's nothing. That kind of man always ends up betraying himself. Thank you, young man. Then, without another word, she took a small phone out of her pocket, a discreet model, without any apparent brand, and typed a series of short, precise numbers, followed by a few words. Incident 92, Redford, Café Ember, 8:17 a.m. Send analysis plus location. The message was deleted immediately after sending. Angela put the phone back in her pocket, revealed them call to no, and walked calmly away into the golden light of the Texas morning. What no one knew yet was that this simple message would trigger a chain reaction which Ronald Weaver would remember for the rest of his life. That same evening, at 80 kilometers from Redford, nestled between arid hills and protected by a perimeter invisible to civilians, was the ultra-secure military base of Fort Kestrel, headquarters of the Southwest Special Forces. In a large, sober office with walls covered with tactical maps and old battle portraits, the General Marcus Bennett, 53, worked in the dim light of his office. His impeccable uniform, straight build, and square jaw betrayed a man forged by discipline, duty, and strategy. On his desk, a report classified, top secret, eyes only, detailed an ongoing operation abroad. But suddenly, a short, metallic beep breezed the silence. His secure phone, reserved for high-priority communications, vibrated gently. The black screen displayed a simple coded message, delivered over an encrypted line he knew by heart. Sender, A, code 092. He read the message without visible emotion, but his eyes darkened. He read it twice. A single sentence. Coordinates. A time. One word, slapped. He slowly sat up, closed the report, and then pressed a red button under his desk. A few seconds later, Colonel Davis, his field aide, enters, crisp. Yes, General. Marcus spoke calmly, but each word fell like a bullet. Assemble the Delta unit. Now. I want the surveillance footage of the cafe man, this morning, between 8 o'clock and 9:30. Internal cameras. External. Satellites if necessary. Good, General. And locate a man named Ronald Weaver, ex-military, private security, likely unstable. Do it discreetly. If he's armed or moving, we neutralize him. If he's compliant, I want his full file on my desk within 2 hours. He has 12 hours. 12 o'clock to apologize. Otherwise. He didn't finish his sentence. He didn't need to. The colonel nodded, pale, and complied. A few minutes later, the command room was getting busy. Screens lit up in cascades, satellites were reoriented, technicians in lab coats brought up the cafe's video feeds. Everything was archived, time-stamped, analyzed frame by frame. And in the silence of the general's office, Marcus watched the scene in slow motion. He saw his wife, his queen, being slapped in public by a man he didn't know, but whom he would never forget. For a moment, he stood frozen, his fists clenched, his jaw set. He knew his wife. He knew that if she had contacted him, it wasn't to make him act in anger, but in the order. So, at 9:43 p.m., he picked up his personal phone, an old model he only used for her. He called her. She answered immediately. Marcus. Her voice was soft, calm, as always. He felt his rage subsiding just by hearing it. You should have warned me sooner. You know how I am. I wanted you to know it at the right time. A silence. He understood that she was hurt, but proud. That she didn't need a hero, but a witness. He took a deep breath, then asked. Do you want me to handle this my way, or yours? She smiled softly into the phone, barely audible. To mine. But I wish you were here tomorrow. 10 o'clock. In front of Café Ember. Marcus stood up, stared at his reflection in the bay window of his office, then replied simply. I'll be there. He hung up. And that night, no file, no military plan, no briefing distracted his mind from what really mattered. The honor of his wife had been flouted. And at dawn, the one who had raised his hand against her would learn what it truly meant to attack the companion of a general. The next morning, the sky was overcast, the air charged with that silent electricity that precedes storms, not those of the weather, but those of destinies that cross and break. Ronald Weaver, looking satisfied, returned to his post in front of the building of an armored transport company located 2 blocks from the cafe man. He wore his shirt badly buttoned, his belt too tight, and walked with the pride of men who believe themselves powerful simply because they wear a badge. Leaning against the steel railing, he smoked a cigarette while proudly telling his story to two colleagues in gray uniforms. I swear, that woman at the cafe thought she could get away with anything. One of those arrogant, well-dressed women who looks at you as if you were her chauffeur. I calmed her down. One good slap, and she didn't say another word. She ran like a mouse. Hilarious. His colleagues exchanged an uncomfortable look. They gave a forced laugh, not really daring to agree. They felt he was going too far, but no one dared to confront him. Ronald savored the moment. He thought he had dominated a woman. What he didn't know was that he had just elevated himself, without knowing it, at the peak of his own fall. Has 9:58 sharp, and low rumble was heard in the street. 3 black military vehicles, without visible plates, with tinted windows and reinforced rims, parked in absolute silence right across from the cafe. They were anything but civilian. Their straight lines, their dull armor, and the perfect coordination of their arrival were enough to announce a state presence. Passers-by stopped. Cafe patrons stood up. The entire neighborhood held its breath. The first door opened, and Angela Bennett slowly descended. She wore a sober outfit, but this time, nothing about her was discreet. Her figure, her bearing, her gaze, everything indicated that she was no longer alone. That she was no longer the victim of coffee, but the woman who had returned with all the dignity in the world in her wake. Behind her, 2 officers from the Delta unit, in ceremonial dress, got out in turn, rifles held to their shoulders, fixed gazes. Then the center door of the main vehicle opened. And General Marcus Bennett appeared. His boots clattered on the asphalt that he was dressed in his official attire, an impeccably pressed jacket, shiny medals on his left chest, elite insignia sewn on his right shoulder. He wore black leather gloves, which he slowly removed as he advanced. Ronald instantly turned pale. The cigarette fell from his mouth without him realizing it. His gaze flickered from Angela to Marcus, then to the soldiers. He took a step back, losing all composure. An officer approached him, file in hand. Monsieur Ronald Weaver? Yes, well why? You are summoned immediately for disciplinary interrogation, under Federal Military Code of Conduct 12.4.1, for assault on a person protected by rank. Follow us without resistance. But, wait, I don't understand. This is a mistake. I'm a civilian. Angela then approached. She stood in front of him, just a few steps away. This time, she wasn't trembling. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but sharp as the naked truth. I am Angela Bennett, and I am the wife of the general you see here. Yesterday, you slapped me. You humiliated me. You looked at me as less than nothing, because I was, in your eyes, only a woman. Black. Alone. Ronald, pale, opened his mouth, searching for words like someone searching for air when drowning. I didn't know. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to. Exactly. His voice cut short his stammering. You didn't know. And this is the heart of the problem. You think you can put down those you think you are strangers. You only respect the power you can recognize. But respect, Ronald, it's not something you reserve for those who can punish you. It's what you offer to everyone who crosses your path. Even if they don't have a uniform, a medal, or a status. She paused. Around, no one spoke anymore. A crowd had gathered. Silent. Witness. Responsible. Ronald tried one last time. I can apologize. I'm willing to speak in front of a mediator, or a lawyer. The General Bennett spoke little. He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to silence excuses, freeze guilty consciences, and remind us that true authority does not need to raise its voice to be heard. His hand on his wife's shoulder said more than any speech. It was a silent declaration: you are not alone anymore. You never were. Ronald, for his part, was no more than a shadow of the man who had sneered the day before. His shoulders slumped, his gaze shifty. He was escorted out of the perimeter, between 2 officers, under the eyes of a frozen crowd, customers, waiters, passers-by, curious onlookers, all witnesses of a fall as brutal as it was deserved. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He tried to look away, but could not escape the truth. He had become, in the space of an instant, the example we give to others to teach them the line not to cross. Later in the day, the official report was forwarded to the Department of Private Security. The evidence, videos, witness statements, background, and Angela's statement, was enough to permanently revoke his license that he was banned for life. No company would ever hire him for a position of trust again. His name was erased from the lists of honored veterans. He joined a long, invisible line of men whom pride, impulsiveness, and contempt have destroyed. But the story did not end there. A few days later, in the Hall of Honor of the Base de Fort Kestrel, a small ceremony took place. Discreet, without cameras, without fanfare. The young waiter, Eli Matthews, was invited to appear. He was wearing an oversized shirt, his hair still messed up, but he stood tall, a little intimidated. Angela was there, dressed in white, sitting in the front row, a kind smile on her lips. General Bennett spoke briefly, looking the young man straight in the eye. Courage isn't always about holding a weapon. Sometimes it's simply about taking a step towards someone when everyone else backs away. Mr. Matthews, you took that step. For that, you are an example. Then, with a solemn gesture, he handed her a letter of honor for civic-mindedness and exemplary conduct, as well as a personal check, hand-signed, to support his studies. Eli cried. Angela hugged him. It was, in this meaningful silence, a repair of the invisible. A few weeks later, at University of Austin, in an amphitheater filled with young women who had come to attend a conference entitled The Elegance of Silence and the Power of Truth, Angela Bennett took the stage. She wore a long black dress, simple but majestic. No notes. No teleprompter. Only his voice, his story, his gaze. She began. I'm not here today as the wife of a general. I'm here as a woman. As a human being. As someone who was once publicly humiliated, and who chose not to respond with the same weapon. Silence in the room. You could hear a pen being dropped. I won't tell you to turn the other cheek. I'll just say this, sometimes the truth needs space to reveal itself. It doesn't always require shouting. It doesn't need violence. It needs a moment. The right moment. In front of the right people. Then she looked at the assembly, a discreet tear in her eyes. Respect, my dear sisters, is not a luxury that we beg for. It's a foundation we build, even in silence. And sometimes, it's our silence that makes the most noise. In the end, the students stood up as one. A heartfelt ovation. Many were crying. Others, inspired, had already taken out their phones to broadcast his words. That day, Angela did not only do justice to herself. She gave it back to all those who, one day, had been silenced, slapped by prejudice, pushed aside by ignorance. And somewhere in Redford, a cafe served its daily supply of customers. But no one ever laid a hand on anyone there again.